on the Dan podcast.
Hello,
Hello,
welcome
guys.
to the Dan podcast. And this is,
Nelson
and I'm Daniel, and we will be doing a podcast on the story,
for the
the
TED Talk,
the
The
danger
Danger
of
of
a
a Single
single
Story.
story. And this was told by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. And what did you think about when you first read it? Because when I first heard it, I mostly thought about like the stereotypes that we put like day to day. Because there are a
Mm,
lot of stereotypes that we have day to day. I
hmm
feel like they're all based on that same like line of thinking.
mm. Yeah, for me, yeah, when I watched it today, I had a sense of familiarity because I realized I watched this TED Talk um back in my first year of high school.
Really?
Yeah, for an assignment, and then re-listening to it again, I felt this sense of familiarity. But for the most part, I realized that she was really well spoken in the message she was trying to convey, which is also in the title. How telling a single story can be really, um, I guess you could say, dangerous,
Mm,
but yeah, it's not so effective because it can lead to um, not so good consequences.
that's well. I noticed that because when we focus on like one part of someone's story, we're not seeing a bigger picture. We're just
Mm,
focusing on that one thing. Like we're just thinking from one perspective, and that doesn't help because that's how literal people get misconceptions about each other.
mm.
And like in this story, she used a lot of like ethos, which is
Mm.
like
Some good
the
rhetorical choices.
yeah. She used a lot of ethos, which is like
Appealing to, I guess, her sense of authority and like making herself credible to the audience.
yeah, and like phrases of like when she was explaining herself, saying that she's a conventional person coming from a Nigerian household. It's like she wanted to speak to us as an audience to be like, okay, I come from here. This information comes from here. It's not from some AI source. This
Mm.
information is credible. It's live.
And it's from her own personal experience.
Exactly. And that's why I was like, dang, I can relate to this because I understand this person is a person who understands how people work. She's
Mm.
been through it. It ain't like she's talking like she doesn't know what she's doing.
And yeah, and specifically towards the audience she was speaking to an American crowd. I feel like the fact that she studied in America for a few years, that also adds credibility to herself because it shows that she has experience with um, both her own home culture and American culture as well.
Yeah. She also used logical examples, logos per se, to basically tell the audience, like when she was explaining the story about the roommate being studying assumptions about British books being in Nigeria.
Mm.
So she was like, okay, we speak
English.
English, and then it's like, oh, I didn't know that. I thought you guys most spoke Nigerian, but Nigerians' primary language is English.
Mm.
And she was low key shocked when she heard that. And I was like, okay, that's a stereotype that people are setting
Yeah,
and that she
that's
just fed into.
mm,
And then she was like explaining in a logical sense to be like, okay, this ain't logical to think that because this doesn't come from here, we don't know that.
mm, yeah. I feel like he tried to illogicify stereotypes by disproving them, or not disproving them, but like showing how it's not so effective in telling one story because we only hear one side of a story, but you can't understand the person unless you know all aspects of that person.
Oh, for real. I agree because when I was looking at it, I was like, okay, if I really have to understand this, I gotta look at what she's saying from different sides.
Mm,
From the people who already do feed into that stereotype, and from the people who don't want to feed into that stereotype.
mm,
And then she also used a lot of pathos,
mm,
which was like emotion. In everything she used emotion because she was telling the audience, be like, okay, this person doesn't come from this background doesn't mean that they can't grow up to be something. It's just stereotype. Like in the story that she told about her neighbor Fide, who was poor, her like a mom told her, but then she didn't know that his brother was out there weaving baskets, making some bread for himself and the family. And then she assumed they were dirt poor, unfinancial, unprivileged. Assumed they lived in mud, but they don't. They live in a good home, and they're not dirt poor like she said. They make
Yeah.
good enough money for themselves just because they were poorer than the mother. That's what she said to her poor. But she fed into the stereotype because she didn't have enough information until she learned it herself.
Yeah. And lack of information is definitely something that can cause to confusion or just misassumptions. And yeah, I feel like through pathos, she mostly tackled the emotion of pity, pitying people who are less privileged than herself. But in reality, we can see that um they people don't only have pitiable traits, but they also have more traits that make them who they are, which can be looked as something beneficial and strong.
No, I do think like when she did do her thing, I feel like she could have put the like her story a bit further because it was only 19 minutes.
Mm,
She could have like extended it a bit further, and everyone would have been captivated by it.
mm.
Like when she used the anecdotes, like a lot of times,
Oh
she
yes.
used it to draw the reader in. Like she would be like, okay, this story about this person, this story about this person. It's all mind games. She did that just to connect the reader to what she was saying.
Yeah. I feel like the use of anecdotes was the strongest rhetorical choice that she used because through the different stories and examples she gave about how a single story can be um, detrimental, it was able to prove her claim or her argument that um, a single story can be dangerous.
Yeah. And she used that a lot. That's where the next part of repetition slash parallelism comes in.
Mm,
Because she repeated that phrase of like, okay, this single story creates this
yeah.
single story creates this. And she did it so that the audience can understand, okay, every action that they're doing here has a consequence. And
Mm,
you need to be like aware of the consequence because if you're not aware of the consequence, then you're gonna be bound to repeat it. And what she's trying to do to the audience is to sway them not to go on that same path and that mental thought that
mm,
those people are going on.
yeah, definitely.
And then she used
So,
irony a lot, though. I did see that. She used like when she would be like the irony of the irony of putting a complex identity into one box, into one
like a
story.
simplistic um, category.
No, it's like you're reading the book, but you're not turning the pages. You're looking at the title and you're looking at the overview, but you're not reading the book.
Yeah, judging the book by its cover.
Exactly. That's where that phrase comes in. Because when people normally like stereotype each other when they look at each other,
It's
your
based off like initial encounters,
initial
initial
responses, what you
yeah,
hear about it for someone else, probably.
that's true.
Like if you come up to your friends and be like, "Oh shoot, I heard from this person about this,"
Mm,
so you ain't gonna look at them the same way. You can
yeah,
say you will, but you won't.
mm,
But you know,
that's where the
that's where the
danger comes
irony
in.
comes in. Exactly, that's where the danger. Cause that is dangerous. Cause imagine you got kidnapped, and then someone's like,
Oh nah.
imagine you got kidnapped, and someone's like, okay, um, this person got kidnapped, but then they hear from other people that that person tends to lie, so then they don't know, okay, this person's being serious,
Mm,
this
it
person
can.
being serious. Yeah, they don't know about the complex identities that go on within that one person, so
Mm,
then that person may end up the other person may end up being kidnapped and never getting help because
mm,
of the fact that that person got stereotyped by that one identity that they had versus the many identities that they did
mm, exactly.
have. And then like one thing I see, an extra one I saw was Kun Junk
Bombastic
Junk
side eye.
Junk
Criminal
Junk's
offensive
posting. I don't know
side
how to
eye.
say it.
Do you
I don't know how to
understand?
say it.
Juxtaposition.
Yeah, jump for position. Well, in this one, she compares her experiences with Nigeria with the assumptions that were made about her in the US to show like the difference between what actually happens like in reality versus what people think. Because people can think of what goes on in Nigeria, they can all think, okay, people are not doing nothing in Nigeria. But people are really working themselves in Nigeria. They're making bread, they're working, they're pulling their weight. And then, lastly, I think her tone was like really sincere and persuasive. Did you catch that?
Yeah, I felt the same thing.
It was powerful.
Yeah, it was really like her tone and what she was saying was really relatable to the audience. I could feel.
Um, overall, I think it's a great story that deserves like a great TED talk that deserves a lot of praise because she put a lot of work into it and she really reached me as an audience.
Yeah, same here. And her rhetorical choices really made her claim effective.
You know. And this is us signing out of Dan for today. Watch again for another episode.